Imagine suffering a plane crash above the ocean with only you and one other passenger surviving. Both of you get washed up on a deserted island with nothing but sandbanks and palm trees. Once you wake up on the shore and look around, you notice the other survivor's footprints. Looks like he woke up before you. As you explore the island, you find him sitting on a huge pile of coconuts. Turns out, while you were unconscious, he went around and collected every single coconut on the island for himself. Coconuts that you would also need if you don't want to starve. Of course, you could go and try your luck catching some fish along the shore, but according to statistics, 9 out of 10 starved fishermen end up dying of hunger in the end. The coconuts are your
Well, where do you get these stats?
only realistic chance at survival. So you ask him, can you give me some coconuts, please? And he says, sure, I can give you some coconuts, if you suck my dick. You are faced with a conundrum. Do you suck the coconut man's dick? Let's keep this question in mind for later.
So this is the hypothetical scenario that I first heard Bosch give against anarchism, and it's a pretty good rebuttal of deontological proprietarianism or deontological libertarianism. But most ANCAPs will never say this because they want to have their cake and eat it too, right? They wanna have their principles, at least pretend to care about them, but throw them away in lifeboat scenarios, which is weird because hypotheticals are very useful for isolating variables and then testing them, which you should care about if you claim to have universal principles. I mean, you can say maybe that principles can be defined as general rules of thumb, but to me that's very useless because leftists don't seem to care about that kind of nuance, especially considering that if you presented them with this case and said that it's not you and one other guy, it's 2 other people, and then the 2 people vote that you have to collect all the coconuts, and then they get 90% of them because there's more of them than you, and that's a democratically ran workplace. We will find out later, this is something that Adam seems to care about. But yeah, you could isolate their principles in the similar way and point out the same problems, which would lead you to conclude that we don't really have the principles that we claim we have, at least the deontological ANCAPs and the deontological lefties. We actually have an underlying principle that is actually universal, unlike the fake principles that we claim to care about, to be all edgy and extremist. But to me, the main principle that I care about is raising social utility. Okay, so I want as many people to be as well off as possible, right? As healthy, as happy, as prosperous as possible. And it just so happens that as we look at empirical data, market systems are what makes these things happen.
A really interesting chart. We have a list of the countries that have the most economic freedom around the world and the ones with the least economic freedom around the world. Hong Kong from then and now, and Cuba from then and now. Here's some actual statistics, right? Where you have the income level of the poorest 10% around the world. The dark green bar there are the most economically free countries. It's so apparent. The more economically free a country is, the higher the income level of the poorest 10% of that country. Again, per capita income and adult literacy, the life expectancy, unemployment, right? The lower the rate of infant mortality, child labor.
My political views, and consequently my urban planning and transit views, are all informed by one overarching value. I want as many people as possible to live the best lives they can with the largest possible degree of freedom.
Okay, so these are multiple variables here, okay? Amount of people, the amount of happiness that the average person has, and the amount of freedom that average person has. We don't really have an answer from Adam here on which one takes priority over which, or which one has more strength over the others, or how would you quantify or measure this, which is also something that's, applicable to me. Funny enough, I don't really say that I care about freedom intrinsically, if you remember what I said just a while ago. To me, I just say that I want as many people as possible to be living the best lives they can, right? But freedom is just the tool that generally, in almost all cases, is gonna produce this, right? So that's kind of what I'm going with.
In practice, this means that every adult person should be free to do whatever they want as long as they don't harm others physically, mentally, or financially. And just to clarify, I am pro-choice. I don't think the fetus is a full-fledged person, so the mother's interests should take priority. So as a freedom-loving person, it should be self-explanatory that I support ideologies such as free market capitalism or even anarcho capitalism, right? So what do these two ideologies entail?
Well, I don't think that necessarily follows here.
In a free market capitalist system, the economy operates with very little to no government intervention. Now keep in mind that we're only talking about the markets here. In every other aspect of life, the government can be very much repressive. For example, even totalitarian dictatorships can be free market, or at least lean towards it. In contrast, Anarcho Capitalism is a system without a government, or at least a centralized institution able to effect coercion on you. Everything is left up to the free market and the people's self-organization. And I'm here to make the case that within a short amount of time, both systems would devolve into a horrifying authoritarian dictatorship. But how come these two ideologies would bring about the exact things they are designed to alleviate, namely oppression and coercion? Let's take a look, first at free market capitalism and
If you get to make a lot of assumptions about the scenarios that you're designing, you could make almost any society steer towards a totalitarian dictatorship where everyone's fucking miserable and poor all the time. Like, if you had a society with democratically ran workplaces where resources are mismanaged and the majority always votes selfishly in their own interest, it's you know, you could easily come up with a lot of examples, and there are historical examples of this happening in USSR. Venezuela had over 200,000 co-ops, you know, and we have to be more nuanced and empirical when we look at these things.
My question to you is your workplace democratic? And by that I mean, do you as an employee have a say in how your workplace is run?
You can. If you had your own resources to create an enterprise, and you know, you get together with a bunch of other workers and you absorb all the risks of running that enterprise, and you know, assuming the costs in case that your products aren't creating social utility, then yeah, you get to decide it. Yeah, you control everything. Sure. I mean, democratically, you have the say proportional to the amount of people that inversely proportional to the amount of people that there are in the co-op, right? So yeah, but you wouldn't necessarily want this, because people specialize in the type of value that they create, in the type of work that they do, in the type of skills and their life choices. That it's very, very, it's much more nuanced and complex than just this.
Well, not really, right?
Yeah, and it shouldn't always be like that. Sometimes it's good to have, sometimes it can work fine. Yeah, but there's a bunch of studies that also I saw Prex Ben, Benjamin Politics guy, give about Italian co-ops and the co-ops in America, that their wages were actually lower than industry averages. So yeah, that's something that you might want to look into. On top of presumably workers being accountable, absorbing the risks of the enterprise, if that's the way that it was actually structured. I mean, if it wasn't, I don't see how it could have really been a co-op or worked. But yeah, that's something. I mean, also you have, like, if you look at Mondragon, there's like 100-to-1 disparity in wages. People who stock shelves get paid like I don't know, $1,080 a month, and if we trust their own data, their own claims, which is that no manager at Mondragon makes more than $1 million a year, that translates to what, like $80,000 a month. So yeah, that's a huge wage disparity. You know, co-ops aren't this utopian structure. I mean, sure, maybe you can, in some cases, it can help you to have a democratic workplace. You can maybe fix conditions a little bit, but this is also going to be improved by market mechanisms. And if that lacks, then even if you have a bunch of democratic co-ops, it's not gonna do you much good. It's gonna be majoritarianism.
Maybe in like a very small business, but even then you don't have any say in the meaningful decisions. Like if there's, say, 5 of you working at a small restaurant as waiters, you can ask the owner to, for example, rearrange the tables a bit, because right now the layout is super inconvenient to navigate with a bunch of plates in your hand, but the outcome of that request is still completely determined by the goodwill of the owner. They can say, yeah, sure, how do you want to organize?
Or actually, the outcome would be determined by consumer preferences. Like if the arrangement of tables would be better for the consumers, that's generally what restaurants are going to aim towards. I mean, if you look at the businesses, they go super hard on making sure that they satisfy all the consumers. I mean, on one hand, you have leftists claiming that companies are literally engaging in brainwashing using imagery and fragrances that motivate psychologically consumption. You know, they go to such great lengths to bow down to the consumer. But on the other hand, you have here them claiming that, you know, it's the other way around, which is I don't. It doesn't really make sense what they're saying.
As the tables, or nope, sorry, the layout is good the way it is. And for me, this is like a little chiefdom.
Yeah, even if you have
will.
a democratically,
it's a small community.
Sorry, even if you have a democratically ran co-op and you arrange tables in a work that doesn't suit the consumers, you're fucked. Your workers are fucked. They're gonna lose a lot of money. All their investments are fucked. They're gone. Okay, they're done. You don't get paid because you don't serve the public.
You get the chief running things, and everyone can just go and petition the chief personally if they want to. But see, the outcome of the request is still determined completely by the chieftain. Even if all 5 of you go to them and say, so here's a petition, all 5 of us have voted to rearrange the table layout, the chieftain can still go, yeah, I disagree with that, so too bad. We end up with a system where the will of the people will be taken into account if and
Okay, so I don't really see the okay, I don't care much about the ontological arguments, but if you really wanna hear my what I have to say about this, if you really wanna push that part, okay, so imagine a workplace where there's a worker who goes there, works there, and works there for like 20-30 years and continuously contributes socially necessary average labor time to the enterprise, and then out of the paycheck constantly purchases share ownership in the company, right? Gives a part of the money to the owners so they can use it to whatever, do R&D, invest into machinery, maintain the things that they need to do, do all the stuff, marketing, and yeah, and after 30 years, he becomes quite a bit of a player in the okay, he has a significant part, a bunch of shares in the company, right? So then a new guy shows up, and he works there for like a month, and after that, if you want to have a revolution and democratically run the workplace, the amount of socially necessary average labor time that the first worker put into the enterprise and versus what the new guy put in, you wouldn't really. It's insanely unfair to just give them equal voting rights on this. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. In reality, people utilize their own personal property, which is always utilizable as a means of production. Depending on how you use it, anything can be a means of production, right? So, to the extent that that people will, decrease their present consumption to invest in creating future value for the society, and to the extent that they will personally absorb risk, they have to be compensated in order for any society to function in any sort of coherent way, right?
Only if A, the leader is a nice person, B, the leader is afraid that some of the subordinates might quit and so they would need to spend more time and money on additional recruitment, or C, the leader believes that the new table arrangement would lead to more efficient work and so the business would make more money. So here, whether the will of the people will be taken into account depends on A, personal kindness, B, fear of losing money, and C, the promise of more money. So as you can see, this is not exactly the perfect recipe for freedom. So what happens in a bigger business with more employees? Big business.
Okay, this is some weird lefty deontological type of freedom where people aren't rewarded for, contributing to the society, and somehow everyone, I don't want to claim to know what Adam's specific ideology is. I've only seen like 2 or 3 of his videos. I get the feeling to this leftist, but yeah, it's not really. I don't really care about all these deontological concepts because they fall apart every time you will put them in any sort of extreme scenarios. You can tear them down pretty easily.
This takes the concept of chiefdom and upgrades it to a totalitarian dictatorship, as Bob Black wrote in his essay,
and again, more meaningless buzzwords, right?
The abolition of work makes a mockery of freedom.
Everyone has to work. If you're on a desert island with 2 other people, okay, and you don't do shit, they're not gonna be really friendly to you. They're not gonna just provide you with things you need to live, okay? Again, if you're with 3 other people, same thing. If you're with 4 other people, same thing. If you're with 8 billion people on a rock floating through space, it's the same thing. Someone has to do shit, right? It's always work with stuff. It's not a law of man. It's a law of thermodynamics, right? Of thermodynamics, biology, and physics.
A great example of this is when major corporations try to prevent workers' unions from forming, also known as union busting. A practice that is illegal, mind you, but they still do it anyway. For example, have you heard about this company called Tesla? and its owner, Elon Musk. And to quote from a Vox article titled "Elon Musk Broke US Labor Laws on Twitter," Tesla tried many different tactics to stop workers from forming a labor union. Tesla workers distributing pro-union leaflets in the parking lot in their time off were harassed by 3 security guards. A supervisor later warned them that they could be fired for distributing those leaflets. Summoning the organizers into his office, Elon Musk illegally tried to dissuade the workers from forming a workers' union. And, as leaked emails have shown, the HR department tried to put the organizers into management so they won't be able to organize a union on the factory floor.
So I'm not really... I'm leaning towards being in favor of worker unions, right? So, I mean, depending on a lot of factors like societal, cultural, and financial, you could have a free market law system that is friendly towards unions or unfriendly towards unions. Now, I don't really care about the ontology of whether or not this is empirically, objectively immoral or moral to discourage workers. I mean, historically, there have been a lot of unions that attained a lot of bargaining power by voluntarily unionizing, and I don't think you inherently need a state to do that. But yeah, I don't really see this as some problem.
And then, once again illegally, Tesla banned employees from wearing pro-union t-shirts and buttons. And, also illegally, Tesla fired one of the organizers' co-workers who criticized Tesla employees who spoke out against a union-backed bill. And then, repeat after me, illegally, Elon Musk tweeted out the following: "Nothing stopping Tesla team at our car plant from voting union. Could those for tomorrow if they wanted, but why pay union dues and give up your stock options for nothing? Our safety record is 2 times better than when the plant was UAW and everybody already gets healthcare." Okay. In other words, nothing stopping the peasantry in our kingdom from enacting democracy. Could those who tomorrow if they wanted, but why get your head chopped off for...
Again, if you had a workers' co-op, you could just as easily have the same incentive and a certain part of a highly skilled, highly intelligent workers, or whatever workers want to band together, or whatever the majority happens to be. It could be race or anything. Discriminate against any other group of people, or any other unions. You could have disagreements between them. Yeah, you could still have special interests even if you have a democratic co-op. I don't know if he's imagining some socialist utopia where money and profit motive doesn't exist, but this is not a problem inherent to capitalism, right?
Nothing. Law and order is 2 times better than when Kingdom was under Louis XIII, and we already have the code Louis. Alright, so at this point, what real choice does the employee have? Proponents of free market capitalism usually bring up the fact that the workers can just switch workplaces or, just move to another city. This is the freedom that workers have. But is it though? Changing your workplace is not an easy thing to do. I know because I've done it before.
Today it's easier than ever. You have all these fucking booming freelancing industries you can go on. Fiverr, you can go on. You can be a YouTuber, you can be a fucking Twitch streamer, you can be you can go on TikTok, literally just post a few videos, and already it's so easy to get followers there and advertising deals, and there is greater worker mobility than ever. People from my country, third world plebs, are going abroad to work in I don't know, Ireland, Sweden, Germany, all over the place. There's so much worker mobility today, more than ever. This is really a silly point to me.
Long, time-consuming, financially difficult. Chances are you'll be...
Yeah, again, we are fine. The situation in the world isn't that everyone has to work 24/7 to live, to not die, right? The situation is generally that people work to have luxury. That's kind of where we are right now in the history, okay? That's kind of how things are right now. But it's not gonna be like this forever if these leftists keep, bitching about nonsense.
Without a salary for at least a month, not to mention how stressful it can be. Not to mention, the older you get, the more difficult it will become to get hired. I know people personally who tried to change their jobs in their mid-40s, despite them being super qualified.
Yeah, again, if we want to look at anarcho-communist utopias for a moment, I got some things right here, okay? You're not gonna like this, because leftists are not gonna like what I found, okay? This is about Catalonia, okay? Catalonian communes. CNT-FAI. Collectives also suffered internal difficulties. Unproductive members were an increasing concern, and collectives implemented rules about who could join. Elderly, orphans, disabled, and widows were very divisive issues due to reduced productivity. Family size became a problem as families were paid a wage according to the number of children, and large families would take advantage of collective services, which was a financial burden that smaller families resented. Senior members and refugees were seen as burden for lacking collectivist spirit. Tension also erupted between workers and those managing outputs, as well as disputes over how much work members had to put towards the collective. Yeah, I think this is by the Spanish historian Michael Seidman. Yeah, I think this is. Sorry, my notes are kind of a mess. I think this is from Michael Seidman, but yeah, he sort of looked into the economics of that area in that particular time. I mean, yeah, I also got some other stuff. If you guys want, I got like 2 very dense pages of just for Catalonia and all the problems that they have. Like their output dropped, they still had sexism, racism. They still had all kinds of problems. But yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, if you're old, communism sucks. Probably much worse than capitalism.
Fighting with ton of experience, in a booming job market, it was still super difficult. Also, what if there's nothing for you to do in your area? What if you live in some small town in some flyover state with like 1 Walmart and 2 other workplaces, and you want to quit your current job because your employer wants to cut your salary to $5 per hour and increase your work hours to 16 hours per day? Because under free market capitalism, they are
I mean, this makes no sense. I mean, if you just understand anything about how businesses compete and how just even today, a lot of regulations do nothing. If anything, they harm the how well off the workers are, right? Most of the comfort and most of the benefits being driven, being created for the workers are from the free market, from companies just competing to make a better deal for the workers who are looking for opportunities. It's just saying if we remove the government, everyone's gonna force workers to work 1 billion hours a day and pay them 0.01 cents. That's just nonsense, this isn't even an ANCAP thing. If you just go look into any college economics course on YouTube, like MIT Open Course, they're gonna tell you the same thing. This is very well understood, and there's empirical data to back up how these things really work. And this is a really dumb thinking. I mean, it's like listening a child who never really studied any of these topics or looked into any of how mechanisms in a real society function. It has almost nothing to do with real life.
allowed to do that. Trust me, there's a lot of things corporations would do under a free market system, like violating
like providing better services and products for the public at better prices,
your privacy,
and better working conditions, at better wages.
the online or offline, or selling off your sensitive information for money. Speaking of
Okay, awesome, whatever. I think it's kind of funny that you have all these leftists shitting on capitalism and then taking all these brand deals, spreading all this populist nonsense about privacy and your data, which is surprisingly enough, I mostly hear this from conservatives, right? But it's not something I care about. Like, I can literally have a conversation with someone about something that I'm looking for, and boom, a fucking ad pops up right for the thing that I need. Like, it happened literally yesterday. A brush steel that cleans concrete. That's something that I needed right then. And literally, when I opened up Facebook 2 hours later, there it was. Literally, the first ad that I saw. I think this is really good. I think this is really fucking useful. I don't understand why anyone would really. The only case where you have to care or worry about it is if there's a violently enforced territorial monopoly on judicature where your data can be used to enslave you, right? That's the only case where you should care about it. But if it's just a bunch of people collaborating and competing to provide you with goods and services that you need better, go right ahead, man. Take my data, take my fucking kidney, let's go, let's fucking go!
According to proponents of free market capitalism, if you are out of options, your main recourse is just to move to a different city. Now, of course, this can be a fine solution, but we cannot ignore just how destructive it can also be.
Again, what if you're in a shitty social democratic country that has like 20-year waiting lines for an apartment because of rent controls, or 10-year waiting lines for medical services? Your only option is to move. to a capitalist country that doesn't have those problems.
Moving to a new area can be hugely stressful. I know because I've done it before. Not to mention, if you move from some flyover state to, say, a coastal state, you'll
First world problems, first world problems.
be leaving behind friends, family, acquaintances, i.e. you will lose your
Yeah, dude, all these fucking friends from my high school are spending, all day slaving away in Germany and Ireland, crying their eyes out. I can't be with my mom, I can't be with my dad, I have to work here in another country. God, you're a fucking clown, Adam, holy shit.
social safety net and you will lose your community. And this is made
Yeah, the community, holy shit. I have to go work for a few months in another country, all I have is texting them on Facebook and, being on video chat with them, it's so fucking sad. It's almost like, it's almost like lockdowns, it's almost like all the psychological problems of lockdowns, except it's not as bad because you can just go back. What are you even talking about, dude?
all the worse if you have, say, school-age children. You have to take them with you. That means leaving behind their school, their friends, hell, even maybe their boyfriends or girlfriends, the teachers they knew, the neighborhood they grew up in, maybe even the grandparents or other relatives who also live there. Now, I'm no child psychology expert, but I don't think for some reason that that's particularly conducive for the child's development. The only group of people who would not be affected by the negative consequences
People have left their children with children's grandparents to go to other shit all the time since the dawn of man. It has happened, to go do something else, to go for a vacation, to do anything. I mean, it's not a new thing. The only places where things like this are really a problem is places that are fucking poor, like communist countries.
of moving that much would be young adults between the ages of 18 and 25 who are hyper online, don't leave the house that often, and have very few to no real-life friends. And so let us now talk about Anarcho Capitalism and what its proponents want to bring about. And so, as we discussed before, free market capitalism doesn't want government influence in the market. However, the state
Fucking based.
can be very much present in other aspects of life. For example, they can still provide public services and infrastructure next to the private ones.
Cringe.
Anarcho-capitalism, however, in its primal form, is a stateless society. There is no government. Everything depends on people's self-organization and the free market. All the functions that were performed by the government previously are now completely privatized, meaning you could live on your private property and freely contract with anyone else without any coercion, as long as they basically just don't mess with other people, also called the non-aggression principle.
Okay, I don't care about the NAP. I think that the legal system should be market-based, which would probably trend close to NAP, surprisingly close actually, but it wouldn't be a perfect representation of the NAP. Look, you could still end up with some statist policies that happen when most people are dealing with most peoples. You could have some areas that would be complete ancapism. You could have, a mixture of all kinds of different scenarios. Like, yeah.
This means that technically you would be able to live a life of absolute freedom. Well, until the Amazon Gestapo shows up and tells you that you are now under the rule of holy Jeff Bezos I, and anyone opposing him will be decapitated in an Amazon warehouse, and their body parts will be sent to their family members as a warning in boxes with same-day Amazon Prime delivery. But hey, if you don't agree with this, you'll be perfectly free to start reciting the non-aggression principle until the firing squad officer tells you to shut the fuck up and keep digging.
Okay, so the scenario that Adam constructed is that Amazon will show up at your doorstep, telling you that you're under the rule of Jeff Bezos. And I did some quick back of the envelope calculations on cost benefit of this situation for Amazon and what would probably happen in society as I imagine it, with a free market-based law where there are a few competing rights enforcement agencies. And yeah, so the first thing, direct costs, contract kill is about $15,000 per hit. If you wanna send someone to go to someone's house and do this, it's roughly what you gotta pay. Now, as soon as armed people show up at your doorstep, what do? You call your rights enforcement agency, aka that would be the state police, right? Because today we live in a world where it's monopolized, right? So that's your only choice. But yeah, in this world that I imagined, it would function similarly. As soon as you see armed people showing up at your doorstep, your rights enforcement agency would be notified, whether you have cameras in your home, whether it's somehow automatically, whether you press a button on an app or you call like 911 or something like that. So these assassins would be liable for murdering you if they manage to do that. just as the guy who paid them to do this would probably also as well be put on trial. And yeah, in order to prevent this, Jeff would have to also bear the costs of supplying an anti-retaliatory defense structure, which roughly costs about $100,000 per soldier per year. But this is with the draft and with people volunteering for war, right? So the new recruits are paid like $20,000 per year, so that's not really a price where you would be happy to risk your life, unless you experience psychic profits serving your country, and things like that. Yeah, this would be a different scenario. You would have psychic losses, psychic costs for risking your life in order to murder your own people, right? So you would have to be forced to pay market price, since there is no draft. Drafts are something that states have, right, to force people to join the military, right? So in the first place, if you want to establish a state, you first have to pay the market price for these things. $100,000 per soldier per year is what is paid currently. The US spends right now, so it would probably be somewhere a bit higher than that. Per million citizens, we are assuming a population that this is a city of roughly 1 million people, roughly average population density and things like that. The average amount of officers would be about 2,500, which I put this number here because regardless of whether or not there would be 2 or 3 rights enforcement agencies or 50 rights enforcement agencies in this city, my guess is that it would roughly be similar in amount of officers that exist per population, since these things are also very dependent on culture and things like that. Yeah, that don't really change necessarily when you have different economic systems, but yeah. So in order to match the force of these 2,500 officers that would exist in this area, in where these rights enforcement agencies are protecting their customers, you would have to pay about roughly the same, at least roughly the same size of an army to where you would be able to overpower all these agencies. Or you could try to pay their costs of going out of business. You could literally bribe them to stop protecting people, but their willingness to do that will be only above the amount of money that they can make in a given time period that they plan to be in business. And it depends on a few other variables that, yeah, I should really, that we could really go in depth, but yeah. So that would be roughly $25 billion per year to maintain that army, assuming the war would go on for about a year. Now we can also go in detail on how these rights enforcement agencies would contract with one another and interact with one another, but it would really make the video way too long. So the next thing that I wanted to look at is opportunity costs, the business losses that Jeff would suffer if he tried to do this from missing out on making money. So first things, we would have external boycotts. People outside of this city who would see, hey, this guy is murdering a bunch of people. He's trying to literally enslave 1 million people. Fuck this guy. And this is, in my opinion, a really stupid and uneconomical move. So I'm gonna dump all these stocks, man. This is a dramatic time. This is a time of high uncertainty. I'm gonna play it safe and pull out my money. It could have a huge effect, it could have a small effect. There's really no way to know, in my opinion. I'm not really sure. But yeah, internal boycotts. So we've seen a lot of pressure from consumers when things get when companies do bad things. Like, for example, if this is something that immediately affects you and your family. I mean, if you receive limbs of your parents in your mailbox with threats, you would probably be willing to bear a very, very high cost in order to retaliate. This is a type of commitment strategy that we've seen anthropologically, right? So internal boycott. Okay, so roughly 22% of Americans have a Netflix subscription, 44% have Amazon Prime, and there are also some other services that we could account for, but I didn't really feel like adding those in. But at 50% boycott rate, this would add up to $45 million per year lost. Yeah, plus other services. Yeah, and also you would have people posting shit on Facebook, on Google, on YouTube, creating negative publicity about these events. So yeah, Jeff would have to also bribe Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, other social media companies, to prevent these losses, and he would only be willing to pay up to the amount that he thinks he's going to lose from all this negative publicity, which I don't really know how to calculate, but that's also another. So let's see the benefits. What does Jeff stand to gain from doing this, from behaving like this? So assuming that 50% of citizens either run away or hide or die in the war, there would still be 500,000 people left. Okay, so you would think that now Jeff would be free to exploit all this labor with, as long as he just absolutely gives the bare minimum to keep them alive, he would be able to just enslave them completely and, you know, force them to do fucking anything, whatever he wants. But that doesn't really work, because Amazon can't operate in a single city, employing every single citizen that is able to work. You can't really, Amazon needs to have fulfillment centers and facilities all across the world. It has to be decentralized, and it has to be well coordinated and coherent, and you can just put all of these workers in a single city and have them do something productive. There's going to be a loss unless you're doing something productive. So in what industry are they gonna work? Well, they can't leave. So people who worked outside or whose job really depended on external economies, they can't really do that, since you have to keep a strong border. You have to enclose them in a physical area, and border control is kind of expensive, especially if you're doing it at such an aggressive scale. So these people can't leave, because if they leave, they can just go do something else. They can just escape, you know. They could just run away with their friends and families, or you know, things like that. So closing the economy is going to have a deadweight loss effect. We've seen countries that do protectionism, that close their borders to imports, that close off their economies. They always suffer losses. There's always a deadweight loss. So if you do this, if you have these strict border patrol policies, you're going to have to a lot of that. There is not going to be people, because the money that people make depends on everyone. It depends on people from all across the world. Okay, so if you're strictly controlling that, there's gonna be bureaucratic costs and labor costs of managing that, and you know, you have to really make sure that people who are keeping track of that are people who you trust. You know, you can just enslave people and have them patrol themselves. They're just gonna, you know, let whatever fly. So you're not gonna really be able to do that. But yeah, so they can't leave. Yeah, there's deadweight loss. So you can employ some people. You can have some type of thing. You can run some type of business then inside this city and have them all closed off in this enslaved area, working in your industries. But you can't hire all of them, because you don't even know what the fuck you need to do in order to create value inside the city itself. There is something you can take advantage of, something really, really important, and this is something that ANCAPs understand, okay? So you can keep them running their own businesses, but you can force them to give you a part of their profits, okay? So that's something you can do, and that's the most economical way, because we know that central planning doesn't work. You can't just tell everyone what to do and expect to create value for yourself. Look at it this way. North Korea has 25 million people, but net worth of Kim Jong-un is $5 billion. Wait a minute, I mean, Bezos is much richer than that. You need to have an economy if you want to create wealth for yourself and for other people. What you need to do is let people have their own businesses and then take a percentage of their profits, okay? So with 50% deadweight loss, assuming 60% of people are able to work, because children and old people and people who can't work aren't going to be very useful to you. And this would roughly equate to $1.5 billion in fees collected from businesses. Okay, but there are also costs of maintaining this system. You have to keep people healthy, and you have to keep spending on the border security and on the police to keep them inside this area and to keep them following the rules that you set for them. So, I mean, it's probably obvious to everyone who's been paying attention so far. This is a government. We built a government, okay? This is the state. This is the state, okay? This is it. This is what ANCAPs understand and no one else understands. This is the state. This is literally de facto the state. We live, whether you like it or not, Adam, we today live in a world where everyone does whatever the fuck they want to the extent that they can abuse the systems that exist to get away with it. Okay? And the product of this, of all these selfish interests and people trying to abuse everyone as much as they possibly can through these systems, is what we see today. It's the state. This is how it works. So, if we look at all these numbers, the reason why Jeff Bezos isn't the grand ruler is because it costs $30 billion to enslave a city of 1 million people, but you only get, at best case scenario, $1 billion per year out of it. So it's not. I don't really see this as a sensible argument, other than anarcho capitalism would evolve into a government, and then everyone will be taxed, and because people can't really build their own infrastructure and provide healthcare for themselves if you enslave them and take all the money from them. So that's how these things go. I'm sorry, but this is just a funny internet meme that you guys like to throw around. It's a cartoon, it's a meme, okay? It doesn't have any bearing in any, it doesn't make any sense in reality. It doesn't make any economical sense. You have to look at empirical data and respect thermodynamics if you want to understand how these things can work and what problems there can be in a society. But yeah, this is just my estimations. If someone has some better ideas on how to calculate these things, I'm open to hearing examples.
If by now all of us can start seeing the problem, the fatal flaw at the core of free market capitalism, and consequently anarcho-capitalism. Both ideologies seek to increase the power and influence of institutions that are autocratic in nature. Traditional corporations are set up like dictatorships. The owner has absolute control, and the subordinates can only hold the owner accountable through a government, which in the first world is a parallel, democratic, more powerful power structure, and so it can hold the corporate autocratic power
That's a nice meme, bro.
structures accountable. If you get rid of it, then the only game remaining in town will be the autocratic.
Again, you have to probably have to explain why democratic power structures are inherently good, because we've seen these things play out really poorly, and there's nothing intrinsically beneficial to society just because you have democratic power structures.
Meaning they'll be the ones with ultimate control. In free market capitalism, they'll control the economy, and who knows, maybe more things by proxy, and in anarcho-capitalism, they'll control everything. And guess what? Coercion happens to be the central part of.
Again, in anarcho-capitalism, there's no real class controlling everything. They're just consumers, and all workers are consumers.
Any autocracy. So if your goal is the lack of coercion, then free market capitalism or anarcho-capitalism should be the last things you would want. And I'm confident in making this statement because coercion already exists in the current system, and it's not coming from the government.
I think this is wrong. I think that pretty much exclusively all coercion that we experience today is coming from the governments.
Your only choice is to work some shitty job or be homeless, as is the case.
Yeah, you have to work or starve in every society, every communist, every social democratic, every capitalist society. That's how it is.
For millions of people, then I would say you are not really free. I mean, hey, you do have the option to quit and be homeless, but
No, you have the option to quit and go off grid and, build a sustainable, house and just chill. Non-stopping. And the best chance that you have at doing that is in a capitalist system. Yeah.
That's really the type of freedom we would want. And so let us now circle back to the original question. Do you suck the coconut man's dick?
No, you start your own one-man rights enforcement agency and you fucking murder him.
There is a solution actually, namely workplace democracy. Give workers more control over their own workplace. Curtail the absolute power of business owners. Let workers democratically decide how profits will be allocated. So I would personally just give a tax break to any worker co-op firms and see if they work out. If they do, hell
yeah. States backing worker co-ops isn't really a good track record to look at. Okay, 2002 to 2008, Venezuela invested in lots of co-ops, started over 280,000 co-ops. In 2006, only 50,000 remained. Reasons for failure: exploiting government grants, workers uninformed or to make business decisions, lack of good leadership. National Bureau of Research published a study in 2005 concluding co-ops invest less in long-term assets, take fewer risks, grow slower, create less jobs, and also exhibit lower labor and total factor productivity. Now, productivity is something that's very, very linked to social utility. If you want to have a society that's wealthy and happy and healthy, you should really care about productivity. This is something really important. I'll leave a study in the description if I don't forget. A survey of 95 US co-ops showed wages were well below industry average. Robert Jekyll and Joyce Crane, 1984. 2006 study in Italy found wages in co-ops 14% lower. But yeah, worker co-ops, not inherently a good thing, not really empirically proven to be good for the society. So in some cases they can work if they're nested within capitalist systems and they have a coherent incentive structure internally. Then they won't completely fall apart like they did in, you know, Yugoslavia, Venezuela, USSR, wherever they've been tried. You know, there won't be those huge catastrophic problems. But yeah, I'm not really sold on this thing from a consequentialist standpoint.
Yeah, let's have more. If not, well, I guess we'll just have to figure out something else. But there are pretty successful examples already, so I've no doubt they would work out actually. Now, upon hearing this, you might ask, okay Adam, but if co-ops are so good and, you know, better than traditional firms, how come we still have traditional firms? How come we haven't transitioned into worker co-ops? Well, consider the following. Just because a system is better, it doesn't mean that we will automatically transition to it. The prerequisites of capitalism existed centuries before capitalism itself. And I do believe that the next step after late-stage capitalism, the system we have currently, would be co-op-based capitalism.
Oh man, I'm sorry to burst your bubble. We aren't in late-stage capitalism. We are in the fucking earliest stages of capitalism.